watching Gearz, brought to you by Holley Performance Products. Fuel your passion. And Cornwell Tools, the choice of professionals.
Hey, welcome to Gearz and the continuation of what we're calling the Faded Levi Project. Now, some of you may be wondering, what is that? Well, you know what faded Levi's are. All you got to do is look down. You're probably wearing some. It's those worn-in jeans that just fit right and they look right and they're just part of you. Well, projects can be the same way. Of course, on one side you have the junker and on the other side you got the high-end build, but right in the middle you've got that Faded Levi project because it just fits and it's got the right attitude and it'll do anything that you want whenever you want. A prime example of that kind of project is this old 77 Jeep CJ5 Levi Edition. If there ever was an example of faded Levi's, this is it. Because it's well worn, it's got some patina on it, got some dents, got some dings, but it's still in great shape. It's just been sitting, so it needs to be put back out on the road, which is what we're going to do without losing the character and without spending a fortune. And at the same time, fix some inherent problems that these old CJs had. So the first thing we did was fix the problem areas. So off came the old suspension. And a new 4-inch lift was bolted in place. New fender well headers fixed the leaky exhaust system, and dropping the tire size from 35 to 33 will fix some fender rubbing issues as well. Okay, with that taken care of, today we're going to jump into some simple modifications that every CJ Jeep can benefit from, starting with the steering. Since its inception in World War II, the Jeep has always been a tight fit for the driver, with the dash against your knees and the steering wheel in your chest. The CJ5 was longer and wider, so it solved some of those problems, but not all of them. Even in the later model CJs, the position of the steering column was always an issue. If you were 6 feet tall, the tightness of the doorway and the position of the seat and the steering wheel all worked against you to try to keep you from getting in or out of one of these things. There's just no room here. Now, obviously, the solution would be to put in a tilt column, but you only had two options. One was to try to find an original tilt column, not easy to find, or find a tilt column out of something in a junkyard and adapt it in. Now there's a third option. I Did It has been around for a long time, and they are well known for their aftermarket steering columns for hot rods and muscle cars. But they also have this tilt steering column specifically for the Jeep CJ vehicles. Now, as you can see, it bolts right in place of your stock column. It's the right length, and it will hook to your stock wiring or aftermarket wiring, whatever you're using, and it will fit your stock steering wheel. It even has the ignition switch on the right side on the column. So this is going to look just like a factory column, except this one tilts. And just in case you're wondering, it will hook right to your stock steering shaft, and if that's worn out, I Did It also has a replacement steering shaft with U-joints at either end. All right, let's get this thing in place. Okay, the first step, ironically, is to make room to work. So we're going to pull out the seats and the console and set them aside. For those of you that don't know, one of the things that made the Levi Edition unique is at the top, the sun visors, the dash, even the seat had this fake denim look on it, which is pretty cool. I told you this thing's been sitting a while. Look at those leaves. Next, we'll unhook the electrical connections on the column. Then we'll disconnect the steering shaft under the hood, unbolt the column under the dash and from the firewall, and carefully slide the column out of the dash. Okay, with the old column out, let's see how it compares to this new one. Now, as you can see, the length is right on, the splines are right on. The electrical connections that everybody is nervous about, this one here for the turn signals, horn, and flashers is a direct plug to the OEM plug. And then this one activates your ignition. It comes with some new relays, and these plugs here plug into the wires that came out of here. So this truly is a plug and play deal. Now, you will reuse this bracket. As you can see, this bracket goes right here on the new column. It'll locate it in perfect position. Then you will reuse this dash cover, and you will need to reuse this firewall bracket. So that'll need to be cleaned up and painted. And of course, the gasket that goes between that bracket and the firewall usually comes out like this. We'll need a new one of those too. To install the new I Did It column, just slide it in place and bolt it up. Like I said before, it utilizes all the stock upper and lower brackets, so there's no guesswork here. After that, it's just a matter of making the electrical connections, putting on the accessories and the steering wheel. A good place to put the new relays is on the firewall under the heater. Just make sure that they don't get wet. If you plan on messing around in deep water, mount them higher or seal them in plastic. Okay, let's see what this thing will do. Look at that. That is awesome. If you've got a classic Jeep, you need this. Now, while we're in here, there's another upgrade that any vintage Jeep can benefit from, and that's in the brakes, but not necessarily down on the axles. No, I'm talking about the power booster, or in this case, the lack of one, since most of these old CJs came with manual brakes. So when you hit the pedal on these things, it's all you, man. It's all your leg. And when you start putting bigger tires on these things, you're going to wish you had power brakes. Fortunately, Crown Automotive has a solution for that with this brake conversion for the CJ. As you can see, it's got the power booster and a matching master cylinder, all designed to bolt right into a CJ. Here's how to do it. We'll start by removing the original master cylinder. Okay, the power booster is the first piece to go on, and it's going to be a lot easier to make the connections up underneath to the pedal if the steering column's out of the way. So we pulled that new column out, which is another reason why you want to upgrade to an aftermarket column. It slides right out. Now, to mount the booster, as you can see, it bolts right to the stock mounting holes. If you look right in here, you'll see that there's a big hole in the firewall that's going to allow water and dirt and noise and all kinds of junk to go right into the passenger compartment. Obviously, we don't want any of that. Now, there are big grommets available, but nothing that's exactly that size. So how are you going to seal it up? Well, we made us a little panel out of sheet metal. As you can see, we cut a hole in the center that fits a standard firewall grommet that you can get from Painless. And it's going to bolt right in place with the booster. It's going to seal the hole and still allow the rod to come through. Next, we'll bench bleed the new master cylinder and then bolt it to the new booster and hook up the brake lines. So, as you can see, getting your brake pedal ratio right is an important part to putting together a quality brake system.
Now, due to the change of location of the master cylinder, you will need to make new, longer brake lines to connect to it.
Obviously, you're going to need to bleed the brakes once you're done with this. The final connection is running a hose from a manifold vacuum source to the booster, and you're in business. Hey, welcome back to Gearz on our old faded Levi project. You know, with classic CJ Jeeps getting more popular every day, we decided to show you how to take one and do some upgrades to it to make it more reusable and more reliable, but at the same time not lose all the cool rough edges that make a Jeep, just like an old pair of Levi's. Now, so far we have solved the age-old problem of getting in and out of a CJ5 by adding a tilt steering column. And we've added some much-needed boost to our stock manual brakes by adding a power booster under the hood. But we're not going to stop there. Take a look. Rebuilding your stock brakes is a good idea if you're installing that power booster, and Crown Automotive's got everything that you need to rebuild your rear drums and your front discs as well as all of the bearings and the seals to do your hubs, everything. Matter of fact, they have restoration parts for just about everything on that Jeep, from those windshield wipers that are stripped and not working to that clutch linkage that's sloppy. But restoration parts are one thing. Today we're talking about upgrades, and there's a big one on the back of the CJ. Take a look. If your Jeep has the stock AMC 20 rear end and you plan on doing some more serious off-roading, you need to upgrade those two-piece axles to the stronger one-piece axles like these from Crown Automotive. Now, as you can see, the kit comes with two one-piece forged axles. You get the new studs, and you have all the bearings and the inner and outer seals, everything that you're going to need. And these are designed to slide right in place of those weaker axles, and it will eliminate a notoriously weak spot in this axle. Now, we've shown you how to put those on before, so we're not going to go into it today, but I will remind you that these utilize a press-on bearing once you get the outer seal and the backing plate in place. So make sure you have access to a press before you jump into this. And once they're pressed on, it's pretty much a bolt-in deal. All right, another issue with these old CJ5s was how narrow they were. It made them easy to flip. Now, obviously, one solution to this is to swap in wider axles. And if you're going to be doing some hardcore wheeling, that's the way to go. But that can get expensive and time-consuming. And if you're building a daily driver or an all-around trail rig or a hunting rig, it's not really necessary. But having some extra width would be nice, right? Right. Well, that's where these spacers come in from Crown Automotive. These are designed to bolt right onto your stock hub and give you 1.5 inches of width on each side to give you a wider, more stable stance. Now, these aren't just some cheap spacers either. No, these are precision machined from billet aluminum, so they're super strong and there's no fit or balancing issues. If you're planning on putting a lift and bigger wheels and tires on a vintage CJ, boy, having some more width will make a huge difference in how well one of these things handles on the road and on the trail. All right, we got a lot to do here. Let's get busy. Okay, with the brakes rebuilt and everything put on, you can see how nice the stance is of this thing with the wheels and the tires and the lift and everything else we put on. But even better than how it looks, this thing should run straight and true down the road with no wandering and no wobble, and it should stop really fast when we hit the brakes. But we're not ready to do that yet because there's one more thing we're going to look at today, the wiring. Now, I know some of you are probably wondering about the wiring harness, especially when you see rogue wiring like that under the dash and this kind of stuff in the tub. But poorly added accessories does not necessarily mean the whole wiring harness is bad. You can just take this stuff off and fix it. So the question becomes, when do you replace the whole wiring harness and when do you not? Well, obviously, if you're finding stuff like this under the hood or the dash, your wiring harness has been eaten, so you need to plan on replacing it. But if the vehicle has been well taken care of and the wiring is still good and pliable, hasn't been butchered or hacked on, and the ends aren't all corroded and rusty, it's probably safe to reuse it. But, and this is a big but, if you're planning on adding a bunch of accessories like air conditioning and stereo and GPS tracking and off-road lights and a winch and fuel injection and that kind of thing, your little original harness with its 8 or 9 fuses probably won't be up to the task of supplying that kind of power. So it's better to start with a new modern harness that's built for those kind of accessories. Now, I know this may seem like overkill right now, especially if the vehicle's running. But putting in a new wiring harness will save you a ton of wiring issues down the road if you plan on using modern accessories. But this isn't just true for Jeeps either, no. It's true for anything that you might be wanting to use modern electronics on. So, like with anything automotive, the choice is yours and how you plan on using the vehicle.
And now, Wiring Tech, brought to you by Painless Performance Products. American made, American proud.
You know, there are some things that people like to focus on when they're working in the shop. Engines, suspensions, wheels, tires, interiors. I mean, people love to mess with that kind of stuff. But there's also some areas that people hate to mess with, and wiring is right at the top of that list because it can be time-consuming and it can be tedious, and a lot of people just don't understand it. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. So what we're going to try to do today is clear all this up and go into how to make proper electrical connections. Now, when it comes to wiring, most people think of the wire, and that makes sense. It's what carries the current. But if you don't make good connections with this wire, it's going to be pretty much useless because there's not going to be any current to carry. So, how you make the connections with these metal ends to that wire is extremely important. And there's two schools of thought here. Some people think you have to solder all of the ends, and soldering does give you a good, strong connection. And if you're working on circuit boards and electronics, it's mandatory. But with automotive wiring, that's not the case. Even your OEM wiring harnesses come with crimped ends. So you don't have to solder all this, but you do need to make sure that you're doing the crimping right. Take a look. A quality crimp will roll the metal and fold it back down into the wire strands for a solid, tight connection. A lot of fittings also have a secondary clamp here to go down onto the insulation and get more strength in the connection. This kind of connection requires the right crimping tool. And you're looking for one that has multiple jaws for not only different size connectors, but also different style crimps as well. And a ratcheting tool will help you keep from over crimping the fragile metal, and the non-ratcheting tool will allow you access into tighter areas. So having both on hand is nice. Here's the basic steps for a crimp. Strip the wire end and twist the wire together for a tight pack. Set the wire in the connector and the connector in the tool and crimp the wire in place. Next, move out to the secondary insulation clip and crimp that as well. Finish it up with some heat shrink tubing for a strong corrosion-free seal. For more extreme situations, there's waterproof connectors available that have the crimp and the heat shrink all sealed together. And that's really all there is to it. Your ECM connections, your wiring harness, even your spark plug wires can be crimped with this tool. And if your connections are good, your wiring will be able to do what it's supposed to.
What are you working on? Brought to you by Woodward Fabrication, selling quality metalworking equipment since 1966.
Today's What Are You Working On comes from Larry Reagan. He is from Iowa, and his project started in 1988. And it is a 1969 Fastback Mustang that he got at a salvage yard. It was going to be crushed. Now, you probably think, you know, what kind of deal is that? Well, take a look at the car. Man, that thing was pretty rough. Now, you're probably thinking that Larry just jumped into the project, right? Nope. He said he stuck it in a hay barn for 30 years while he was raising a family. So now that the family is raised, he decided he was going to jump into it, pulled the car out, and started working on it. And he had his hands full. Check it out. First thing he did was cut off the whole front end and replace the cowling and the firewall, the floor, the rocker panels, the torque boxes, lower frame rails. Yeah, almost all the sheet metal in the front. Now, he says for a drivetrain, he's going to put a 521 big block in it and a Tremec T56 Magnum 6-speed. That's going to be a nice setup. That's pretty much what this car's got in it. And he says that he picked this project because he's always loved the 69 Mustangs, and he's always dreamed of having one, and now he finally has a chance to build it. Now, he said his goal is to have a rolling chassis by the spring and start applying some paint, bolting it back together, and hopefully driving it within a year. Man, that is a great goal. Larry, man, more power to you. Cool project. So to recognize such a cool project, we hooked up with our buddies at Woodward Fab. We're going to give you a tubing notcher so you can build things out of tubing. Also, we're going to give you one of our deluxe project planning books so you can keep track of everything that you have done on that project. Very important to keep track of that. Then we're going to give you one of our Sergeant Rock die casts, and then we're going to give you a gift card from our buddies at Holley, because I guarantee you there's some Holley products that would make that car even faster and better. And finally, we're going to give you one of our new V8 Interceptor t-shirts. Now, for the rest of you guys, if you want to get in on this, get your project featured on the show, man, you got to send it to us. Go to our website, go to Gearz Nation, and submit it into What Are You Working On. The website's also the place to find out more information on any products you may have seen on the show, any Gearz merchandise, and how to join Gearz Nation so you can stream any of our episodes commercial-free. Also, don't forget to check us out on Amazon Prime, where you can watch past and current seasons of Gearz and check out our new show, Stacey David's Restoration Series. Finally, don't forget to like us on Facebook and Instagram so you can get some behind-the-scenes footage of our weekly web series, Shifting Gears. And if you're a radio person, make sure you check out our new podcast, Tales of a Gearhead. All right, that wraps it up for us today. Hopefully you feel inspired to get out there and start working on something. And hopefully you won't leave it sitting in a barn for 30 years. But even if you do, it'll be worth it when you take it out and start working on it. We'll see you next time.